Special guest. He recently crossed 2 million subscribers on his main YouTube channel, The Needle Drop. We have Anthony Fantano here. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for the 2 million shout out. I appreciate it that you had me on your channel before I hit 2 million, which I think is pretty flattering that you believed in me. You thought that I could cross that line, I can cross that mark. And finally, I'm here thanks to the progressive voice bump. That's
Absolutely,
I,
man.
I owe
Always happy to
everything.
help out smaller channels.
I owe everything to progressive voice.
Okay, so with that said, let's jump into the first topic. So I have to ask you about there was this controversy that happened a couple months ago, and it had a couple of flare-ups. So just in
Mm.
case people don't know about this, I'll do a brief refresher. Um, ContraPoints had sent out a tweet that basically she was not a fan of her friend group or whoever she's with going around and saying their pronouns because it's just too much for her or something, and people took that as her being throwing non-binary people under the bus. I did see you voice your opinion on this matter, so and she ended up like leaving Twitter and then coming back, and then she's now left for what she has said is good. So
Yeah.
go ahead and jump in and just throw out what your thoughts are on that.
I mean, I agree to the extent that was what she said publicly the most inclusive thing that somebody who's a member of the LGBTQ community could say? No, obviously not. But is that the greatest sin that she could have committed? Obviously, ContraPoints doesn't hate non-binary people. Obviously, she doesn't have anything against non-binary people. I think that if we were being just a bit more empathetic, that we could sort of see how, for someone like ContraPoints, participating in this, you could even call it a ritual, where we're all kind of announcing our pronouns, can be a little bit can trigger some kind of dysphoria, and can make it difficult to just kind of exist seamlessly in the gender that you identify as, if you're constantly having to engage in this act where you're reminding people of what gender you are instead of just it being assumed of you. I understand that and I get that. Um, but as tone deaf as that slightly may have been, stating that on her platform in the way that she did, because maybe that was more of a conversation with friends kind of conversation, or an internal thought more than it was an external thought that I'm going to put out onto my platform that I have built on the back of, sort of making political and philosophical statements in the name of LGBTQ and a host of other things that lefty politics people, care about and get behind, and so on and so forth. While maybe it wasn't the best move in the world, I don't think it was really worth kind of scorching the earth and just kind of making it difficult for her to exist online. And basically silencing, not entirely, because obviously she's still doing YouTube and she's still engaging in the online space, but making social media a hostile place for her to just exist and be, I don't think is strategically the best move for people on the left to make, no matter what you identify as. Whether you're non-binary or trans, or even just, a cis person, a cis straight person, or a cis gay person. It's a bad move, because ContraPoints, her voice carries weight. She has a track record of converting people from more identitarian right-wing thought patterns, and having her functioning online, even with this statement that she said, which in person she probably could have, conversed with someone about, and sort of been convinced into a more inclusive position. Instead of going in that direction, it just kind of seems like people in her community turned against her, and now we're kind of one voice shorter in the online space. And I think that that's a sad thing. I mean, as much as I may disagree with other people who are on the left, and I don't claim to speak from the same position as someone like ContraPoints or anybody else who's in a community or has an identity that typically is marginalized. But there are people on the left who I disagree with quite a bit on lots of things. But and sometimes those things come out in a very public way, on Twitter or in other spaces. And as much as I may disagree on some stuff, and I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but still, I'm not trying to like scorch the earth because, and I don't think other people should be as well, um, because having that person still functioning and still doing their thing to the degree that they're doing it well adds more value, adds a surplus of value. It's basically a utilitarian decision being made here. I'm trying to think of, one example that I could think of was, wasn't it Ilhan Omar that didn't want to, in a recent vote, she just sort of didn't want to, use aid to strong arm Turkey into, making some kind of humanitarian decision or something. I'm trying to
There was
recall.
are you talking about like the recognizing of the I think it was the Armenian genocide? Is that what you're
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about?
yeah. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes.
She voted
And she,
present, I think.
yeah, she voted president. She didn't vote, for or against it or anything. She had a statement about how she's not, essentially, um, supportive of that. And I could think of, let's say also, Ayanna Pressley. She recently endorsed Elizabeth Warren. She's the only member of the squad that didn't endorse Bernie Sanders. Now, Ayanna Pressley has never been like the most radical member of the squad, and obviously she is a part of the whole Massachusetts politics machine in a way.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of endorse, Warren. But still, as much as I disagree with that decision, with Ilhan Omar's decision, like they add so much more value with my support to the political conversation than just being completely abandoned or disavowed, because they have so much more potential going forward to do so much more good than they've done already. To just sort of totally burn this bridge over one decision, over one choice that to me isn't like a straw that should break the camel's back.
So so my second question was actually just going to be, and you kind of already answered it, was just about the response. And like, it seems that you don't think that the response was warranted for what she said.
Well, and I don't think it was warranted for what she said. And I think another thing that a lot of her fans don't quite realize, don't quite care about because they're living in their little echo chamber, is that the right used this as an opportunity to basically continue their narrative that, oh, look at ContraPoints, she's being eaten by the animal that she served or she created, because this is what SJWs do. They eat their own, this, that, and the other way, even though there are plenty of examples of the right eating their own. But anyway, but this is what the left does. This is that. This is the other thing. And again, it just sort of allowed them to continue that narrative. And all that really we got out of it was maybe some people who were angry at ContraPoints over the statement got to just go, hey, 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 that fucking bitch, fuck her, or whatever. She said that thing that, is this phobic or that phobic, or I fucking hate her. Da, 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 da. And I mean, look, I guess maybe that made you feel good, but you hurt the overall movement by engaging in what you engaged in. Because again, we're one less voice to convert other people. We're one less voice to spread these ideas and concepts and convincing arguments on things like issues in the Twitter space. And I feel like the Twitter space and really all of social media needs as many convincing and weighty voices as it can gather to advocate on those issues, because this is, the left didn't choose for this to be a really hot front on the culture war right now, but it is. And, look, if it was the left's decision, we would just be allowing trans people to operate in whatever way they wanted to, with whatever freedom they wanted to, because it's their life, it's their choice, it's their identity. What business of it is mine? I feel like trans issues are certainly medical and should be taken care of in the same way that anything else would under a Medicare for all system. And, again, at the end of the day, how a trans person decides to live, how a non-binary person decides to live their life is of no concern to me, outside of them being prevented from being able to live their life, outside of their rights being trampled. Then I am very concerned with how they're living their life and whether or not they're able to. But for whatever reason, the right has decided to make this a linchpin type conversation in the same way that gay marriage and gay rights were during the George Bush years, and during the Gore and Kerry elections and so on and so forth. So it's unfortunate that we have to sort of fight this fight right now and sort of fight this part of the culture war because it has become such a hot button topic for the right wing. And again, I think we need as many voices on this as we can possibly get. And treating ContraPoints the way that she was treated in reaction to those very mild statements that nobody outside of her community would even have any concern over, because this is like so many layers deep into the trans and non-binary conversation, into the theory behind these philosophies and these identities and, you know, the way that people exist, you know, in these spaces, that nobody on the right even gets what the fuck is going on. You know, your average right winger, who is transphobic, mind you, doesn't know the difference between a trans person and a non-binary person and gender fluid and what this, that, and the other. They have no clue, and they don't care. You know, to them, it's all just one thing they should be afraid of. You know, they think of trans women in sports. They think of trans women in bathrooms. They think of all these weird, stupid fucking scenarios that cause them to have these lizard brain type reactions that really just like affect so few people and don't really kind of play out in reality in the way that they try to make it out to in their terrible arguments. So, look, if this had just slid by, the right wouldn't have been able to dunk on it. ContraPoints would still be existing in the Twitter space and sort of advocating in the way that she advocates, very successfully, mind you. And I think the left generally would be all the better for it. But now we're kind of down a few points because we decided it was better to kind of burn bridges instead of build them.
Okay, I hear you on that. I pretty much agree with that. I think that's a pretty good summary of that whole situation. Now, to move on from that, I want to get your thoughts on some of Destiny's controversies. Now, I guess we could start with the whole N-word saga. Now, what I did see is there was something that you had I think he made a joke or something about an N-word pass, and I think that that was where you responded to with saying that, you know, you're done with him. So I also want to hear your thoughts on, you know, why that was the straw that broke the camel's back, and just your general thoughts on that situation as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I forget the tweet that I responded to, honestly. And there were fans of his who, you know, were insinuating that, oh, he was just joking and I got triggered by a joke and this, that, and the other thing. But here's the thing. My issue with Destiny, you know, on this topic anyway, isn't really that, you know, he claims to use the N word in private. I myself have made similar arguments about not wanting to use the N word in my reviews, even though obviously the opportunity comes up when there's an album title with it or a song title or there's a lyric with it that I have to reference or something like that. You know, obviously there's a point where I have to decide, okay, I'm just going to say N-word here. I'm not going to say the word. And the reason that I decided not to do that, and I explained myself on this, is that I'm in a public forum where I have lots of different people from lots of different walks of life coming in. And there are people in society who sort of, and for very good reasons, you know, see white people using that word as just like rude. It's offensive, you know, because of the history behind the word, because of systematic oppression and a whole host of other things. When it comes to America's backlog of marginalizing minority groups. So obviously there are people who are offended by a white person's use of that word. If in most, if not all contexts, I'm not the type of person who would get you know, all up in arms or offended or, you know, start trying to carry a torch if you're like quoting it somewhere. And there's even some, you know, discussion of that going on in the hip hop community with people like Travis Scott or Schoolboy Q obviously have like very lax opinions on like, hey, you know, if some white person says it and it's my lyric and they're singing at a show, like whatever. There are other artists who have the very opposite opinion of that, and they're entitled to their opinion too. You know, I'm not saying who's wrong or who's right. But I'm saying if you want to try to exist in a polite way where you're not offending anybody and you're a content creator and you want to be on the good side of as many people as possible, it's probably just good rule of thumb to avoid using the word colloquially, in a jovial way, in a funny way, in an edgy way. I mean, I know there are people out there that do it, but I'm just saying what is a best practice if you want to go against the least amount of grain As a content creator, you want to piss off the least amount of people. You want to offend the least amount of people. You just want people to, and that's the other thing. Like even in a casual way, and even in a way where you're applying the N-word in the least offensive way possible. I'm just quoting in a lyric. The current day perception of the word is too controversial. And even if I were just merely quoting the word in a lyric, merely doing that would become a big fucking like weeks long controversy. There would be no fucking focus whatsoever on anything that I said in the review. It'd just be a fucking nightmare. And honestly, like there are dozens of hills that I wouldn't mind dying on. Whether or not I can quote the N-word in a lyric is not fucking one of them. Like, obviously, there are way bigger fucking fish to fry on the planet than whether or not I get to use the N-word in a review. Like, honestly, like, who gives a fuck? If that's where your priorities lie, if that's where you feel like you could maximize the amount of, I don't know what, freedom and goodness in the world by just doling out N-word passes in every direction, like your eye is really far off the fucking ball. Like you have no fucking clue how shitty the fucking planet is if your primary concern and what really gets you fucking riled up is that you're not allowed to say the N-word, which for all intents and purposes, you are. It's just that you can't say it without people getting pissed at you. And that's the thing. People are right to and free to, or rather people have the right to and are free to feel any type of way about anything that you say. I mean, that's essentially like what I have to deal with day in and day out. And honestly, I don't need another headache. I don't need another reason for people to get mad at me. And genuinely, I would like to try to give off a feeling of, respect and politeness in my reviews. I know that through my content and through me talking, especially about hip hop, people on their phones, on their computers, wherever they may be, my voice and my personality and my presence is being broadcast into thousands, millions of different spaces that I am never going to physically be in. And, I won't have the opportunity to be there and explain myself or give whoever happens to be walking by and hearing me or seeing me an in-depth explanation as to why I'm saying what I'm saying or what it means or this, that, and the other thing. And if somebody's first impression of me is just me saying the N-word a bunch of fucking times because it's in rap lyrics in a review that I'm doing, that may not be the impression that I want to give off. And I just wonder if it was the best choice for Destiny to not say that he uses the N-word in private, but insinuate it in such a way that he uses it in a way that's like really edgy or really offensive and this, that, and the other. And that personally is not an attitude that I would want to give off. That it's like, oh yeah, I just use the N-word for fun when I'm in private, or I just use the N-word for the lulls when nobody's watching, which I mean that is not the case. That is not the type of energy that I want to give off. The few instances of which I have been shown to use it have been a context, quotation type context, and again, that is something that I have kept out of my reviews because that is not something I have interest of putting in my reviews. That I'm interested in putting into a space where people are, sort of going to catch me out of context. People are going to see me just talking about a record review. They don't want to be like combated with this moral dilemma of whether or not a white person can say the N-word even in a quotation. That's not, again, like a hill I'm interested in dying on.
And so, was that more like the straw that broke the camel's back type of thing? Because we all know that he's been going on this weird sort of onslaught against the left.
Well, the straw that broke the camel's back really has little to do with the N-word or the N-word controversy, and more to do with, again, it's like, I know we're talking a lot about the N-word, but at the end of the day, this really has little to do with the N-word and more with a pattern of behavior that I've been seeing in Destiny, where it seems like ever since he had his fallout with Hasan, he's just been going through one very transparent motion after another to just like piss off whatever lefty people are following him, and like that is what it is. To me, the whole N-word thing was just like another example of it. And since the N-word thing, there have been dozens of other examples. That was just the point at which, like, okay, this is stupid. Like, can you do anything else other than just to exist, to try to excommunicate anybody who you deem as being too far left, and Destiny deems like fucking Bernie Sanders supporters as being too far left, like they're fucking communist revolutionaries or some shit. Yeah, anything around that area, Destiny deems to be too far left. So Destiny, unfortunately, has been just engaging in all of this rhetoric and all of these behaviors that are meant to alienate and call out and just make feel awkward anybody who might be coming to his content from that point of view. And to me, that was just, again, another example of that. And it just got really annoying because when I see Destiny, or up until this point when I've seen Destiny, I like to see him engage in good faith argumentation. I like to see him engage on interesting topics. I like to see him debate on, cool stuff, cool ideas, dunk on and shut down total morons, whether they be on the far left or the far right. Just engaging in this very cheap, shallow type of rhetoric just meant to trigger people and get a rise out of people is not like anything to me that has ever made me interested in his content. And keep in mind, like, the window of time in which I've been interested in Destiny's content has been pretty short. Not to say that the guy hasn't been making decent content for a long time, but there was a point earlier on in his career, especially around the time when he debated Vegan Gains, where I thought he just came off as like a total blowhard. And then I think he got better. I think he improved. I think he got much sharper, I'll say, at debating and discussing and exploring ideas and being very factual and logical and playing arguments through in a very concise and methodical manner, and pinning people down on topics that I think they had a hard time squirming out of. And again, since this weird fallout with Hasan that I honestly haven't been paying enough attention to pinpoint the reasons for and the origins of, it's like he's done this really weird pro wrestling type heel turn where he just wants to be the bad guy for no fucking reason, and I just don't get it. I don't get why he would do this. I don't get why he would be embroiled in all of this weird drama. Fucking, I don't know why half the internet knows who the fuck he sleeps with. I don't know why he's embroiled in this weird fucking N-word shit. I just feel like there are so many good things that Destiny could be doing to build himself up, build his platform up, give himself a more positive, image throughout the internet. And I feel like he was getting to a point where he was like redeeming himself a little bit because he has an edgy past. I hear he's got like some weird pictures out there on the internet. I'm not telling anybody to go search for them, but he has a track record. But nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. And even if after this point, Destiny said, "Hey, I said a bunch of shit, and I'm sorry. I'll try to do better." I think he's. I think if he were sincere about it, he's deserving of forgiveness potentially. I don't think he's, at least to my knowledge, done anything that's unforgivable. Again, I don't know every single fucking thing the guy's done over the years, but I haven't caught him or seen him doing anything that would say to me like, I'm never going to think about you or talk to you again and you're fucking Satan. But I think Destiny is could reach a point where he has a moment of clarity and decides that all this drama and all this fucking turbulence isn't like worth it. Wouldn't you rather live a chill, stable life where you're growing your brand in a positive way and you're impacting people ideologically in a positive way? But he doesn't seem to be as interested in that. And honestly, I don't know enough about Destiny personally to know what drives him to that. But I still think a lot of what he's saying and doing is transparent enough to seem pretty obvious to me that it's like, okay, like you're just doing this for a very, very like obvious type of effect or result, and this is not why I started watching your content in the first place. So I'm not interested.
So you're currently not a viewer of his anymore?
No, I've not been watching Destiny stuff lately. No.
Okay. So you did mention Hasan there, so I guess that's a good little way into this. There was this very recent controversy of his where, there was an editor who was editing some videos for him. event, he was looking for a full-time YouTube editor, and then
Uh-huh.
the guy releases the DM logs, and Hasan's like, he's requesting content from this guy and stuff, and he didn't pay him anything, and so this guy comes forward, and then Destiny jumps on that as well, and everybody jumps on it. I just want to know your thoughts on that whole controversy as a whole, especially because you yourself are a big YouTuber, so I'm sure you have some experience in that area.
I mean, yeah, I work with other people. I try to do my best that I can by the people who I work with the most consistently. I was just honestly talking with someone or having an email with someone today about like a merch project that didn't end up panning out, and he was unhappy about it. And there are times when I fuck up, and there are times when I'm not as on following through with working with people as I should be, especially when it has to do with like, oh, I need a graphic design thing. Sometimes my schedule gets the best of me and I get distracted with other shit. And, I forget who I'm talking to or what I'm trying to develop. So, I mean, I guess that happens, but, Hasan, I mean, I don't know enough about his relationship with this guy, and I have not read those logs. So I'm not sure, like, how bad, the whole situation is, honestly. I mean, I think at the end of the day, to respond to this situation, though, as if Hasan is like, I don't know what, a member of the bourgeoisie, and like he's like a fucking, like a member of the owner class, because he didn't handle this contractor, because it seems like he was kind of working with the guy on a contractor basis, and the guy was looking for full-time work down the road. He didn't handle this guy who he was contracting or working with on a case-by-case basis as well as he could. Keep in mind, I guess, as long as it doesn't seem like Hasan was doing something overtly nefarious here, he's just a fucking YouTuber who is like not a business owner, or rather not an experienced business owner, and probably doesn't even have his fucking shit like trademarked or LLC'd. I don't even think his YouTube channel is doing that well in general, from what I understand. Not to like shit on the guy or anything, but like clearly he's not running the most tight ship that somebody could potentially run. So I mean, I would recommend to people out there who are trying to be editors for other YouTubers, don't expect too much. I mean, YouTubers are usually mentally fried because they're trying to put out content all the time, and are usually tired, and sometimes are egotistical, and are distracted by their work, by their social media presence, by a host of other things. Trying to prioritize others unless the money is just rolling the fuck in can be pretty difficult. So again, not to try to soften Hasan's image too much, because I don't know that much about the situation, but there are a host of legitimate reasons that whole thing could have just crumbled in the way that it did and didn't pan out into anything more full time. And maybe Hasan is just like not all that good at sort of explaining this, or putting it out there in a way that makes him seem compelling or understood. I don't know, really. I honestly don't.
There were a lot of people, some people on the left, Destiny also, he's not obviously on the left, but there were some lefties who were going after him, calling him like a fake socialist and stuff like that. Do you think that he is sort of a faux socialist, if you will, and he's this, he's not really that. He's a big capitalist type of guy. He's got all these racks, and he's not paying.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one could see it as a little hypocritical, but I think at the end of the day, I think Hasan is in a position, especially living on the fucking West Coast, where he has bills and financial needs just like anybody else. I'm not sure if I don't know how much money Hasan makes at the end of the day. I don't know how financially, I guess, viable it is for him to basically run his Twitch and YouTube channel like a fucking co-op. You know what I mean? Given the current economy that we live in, and the way that YouTube and most social media sites pay their creators, whether it be through fan donations or advertising dollars, Unless you're like, again, like racking in tens and tens and tens of millions of views, and you're putting out so much content that you require others to be on camera and like a million other things. It can be kind of difficult to uh, I guess sort of envision your little online enterprise as being something that you run in a cooperative or sort of own in a cooperative way. And personally, while I like the idea of co-ops, I personally, if we were to, sort of instill some laws that make it easier or even require for co-ops to exist into the future, in the weird fucking far out scenario where that would even be a thing. I personally wouldn't really see any, I guess, real, I guess I want to say functional purpose in requiring all businesses, even maybe 2 or 3 or 4 person businesses, to be cooperatively owned. Unless you're talking about like major corporations here, where tens of thousands of people are working under, sort of like one fucking billionaire. Then I don't really, see too much of a, need and sort of like forcing or encouraging any kind of like cooperative ownership. Like if you fucking are one person running a cupcake stand or a cupcake truck, and you have 2 people who you pay to work with you on the cupcake truck, and they agree to work for that wage with you on the cupcake truck. To me, that's not like a fucking, sin of the world. Obviously, I agree with elements of, the labor theory of value, and I don't disagree that there are elements of exploitation at work there. But is that as great an injustice to society as like Amazon workers not being able to pull the truck over and get a drink if they're thirsty, or having to piss in bottles while they're working on the floor of the distribution center? No, that is not like as great a sin as that. To me, things like socialism and things like co-ops and cooperative ownership of businesses should be focused on fixing problems like that. Not these awkward business type tiffs between a video editor who's freelancing and a content creator who, honestly, while Hasan has a platform, he's not fucking PewDiePie. You know what I mean? Like, he's probably not running this multi-million-dollar YouTube enterprise. And again, that's not to shit on the guy or what he does. Like, obviously, there are lots of people who are fans of Hasan. But, speaking as someone whose platform is larger than Hasan's, again, I'm not in a dick measuring contest here, but, even with a larger brand and platform and everything than what Hasan has right now, there are a lot of things business-wise that I could be doing better. You know what I mean? So I can only imagine what, loose ends and, sort of like I guess, sort of like unsolved problems that Hasan is working with day in and day out with what he's doing.
So you basically think this is just pretty overblown?
I think it's slightly overblown. I mean, look, Hasan has put out, with his debate style and with his, I guess, combative energy on social media and in the political space, like he's put out a lot of, not the most positive energy out there. And I'm not going to say that I'm not guilty of doing that too. Like, obviously I don't put out positive energy all the fucking time. Like, I put out negative reviews and not good reviews quite often. So, we're all guilty of it. But, given some of the negative energy that Hasan has put out into the social media space, like, you have to consider that, like, unless you are fucking keeping your nose like the cleanest fucking nose on the internet, all that shit is going to come the fuck back around and bite you. The moment that people see you, like, oh, you're fucking up. You fucked up, bro. You fucked the fuck up. It's fucking game time now.
And they're especially doing that with Hasan too, because so many people hate him to such like severe lengths.
Yeah, yeah. And there are people who hate me to severe lengths. And there are times in the past when people have thought like, oh, we got Fantano this time. He's down for the fucking count. And, like, I bounce back.
There's been times like that? I've never seen those.
Yeah, there have been times like that. There have been times like that.
Wow,
but I bounce back because I've got the fucking best teeth in the game. And look, if Hasan can figure out a way to keep his head down and smooth this over and do right by this guy, and save face a little bit, he'll live to twitch another day. So, it is what it is.
Okay, so with that being a summary of that situation, we've got elections going on, man. So I
Hold
want to
on.
know.
Before you go on, I want to ask you a
Oh,
question.
okay.
So what is it about this situation that brought the Hasan discussion out of retirement for the Progressive Voice? Because
Honestly,
I,
I
I
don't
know I know
know.
there, I know there was a Hasan ban.
I don't know, honestly. I'm not sure. Just
You
time
don't
went
know?
on and just time went on, yeah. And I thought it was
Look,
a good time to
I
jump back in.
I've always disagreed with your decision not to talk about Hasan,
You
because
really want to hear that,
I
huh?
I know that in real life you have a deep love for the man, um, as we all do. He's woke bay. He's woke bay. Don't forget.
Yeah, I'm
You
not
know,
sure
don't
about
forget
that one.
don't forget your roots. Don't forget your roots, Hasan. You're woke bay. So, um, I've always disagreed with your decision there. So I'm just surprised to see it back in rotation.
Yeah,
So
no, it's
good
back
for
for
you.
now.
Keep
We'll
on it.
see how long it goes.
Keep
Yeah,
on
it's
it.
back.
This way now, when the Hasan dick pics leak, you'll be able to talk about that shit, and I can look forward to a video on the Progressive Voice about it
I'll reach out to you to jump in on the topic.
for comment. Yeah,
Yeah.
obviously.
Okay. Okay, so there are elections going on right now. So what I want to know is your thoughts. I know that you're a Bernie supporter. I want to know what your thoughts are, how the election is going to play out, how, Bernie's going to perform, and just what your general thoughts are on what's going on right now.
I mean, ideally, I would like to just see a Bernie Warren ticket. That would just fucking slam dunk it. It would be like in the bag. Although if I were Bernie, I would wait a little bit longer because you never know if Warren's gonna like put her foot in her mouth or do something ridiculous or just like listen to her advisors in such a way where it just like torches her image or something. I would sort of like be a little careful about that. But honestly, I think a Bernie Warren ticket would just slam fucking dunk it, and like that's essentially like what we need. And I know Warren's not perfect, and I don't think Bernie's perfect either. I don't think there's such a thing as a perfect candidate. Um, there are issues with Bernie. Not that I want to go over every single one of them right now, but he is the candidate that I agree with the most, and that's like what all I can really say. I mean, I don't want to try to get into this discussion of political philosophy right now, but the most utilitarian and effective thing about Bernie that I can sort of say why I am interested in voting for him is that Bernie would just merely, a Bernie presidency, if it was successful, would get us as a country just fucking updated to the same operating system that every other first world nation is on. Not even talking about like he's going to fix this and fix that and fix all these social justice issues, and it'll mean this kind of, deep, like amazing feeling of this understanding, and that like, that's all great and everything, but honestly, like, fuck all that for a second. Like, the fact that we exist as a country without a healthcare system that takes care of everybody is egregious. I have conversations with people, and I know people in my own personal life who have dealt with cancer, brain tumors, this, that, and the other thing. And it's like when these people have these incredibly debilitating, life-affecting ailments, and you don't have insurance, or you don't have someone in your life who's making a fat salary, like, you're fucked. You're fucking fucked. And the fact that we allow it to continue this way, even if it's to a relatively small amount of people, obviously, like, thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and, even millions of underinsured people, is not a small amount of people to, scoff at. But obviously it's still a smaller percentage than the vast majority of the country. But still, to allow it to happen to even the percentage of people that we do allow it to happen to is disgusting. I mean, there's really all you can say about it. The fact that Bernie would just normalize our foreign policy, would just get us some fucking health care, maybe cut down military spending a little bit so it's not so fucking egregious, and maybe curb in the slightest fucking way Wall Street, corporate profits, income inequality. Keep in mind, Bernie is not a communist fucking revolutionary. Like, he would not completely upend the system. He's not an authoritarian. He's not fucking Fidel Castro. Like, as much as we get on Warren's ass for being a reformer, making tweaks around the edges of capitalism. That's what Bernie's doing too. He's not fucking making as small tweaks as what Warren is interested in, but he's still making tweaks to essentially still a market-based system where, look, at the end of the year, I'm not at the end of the year, but if Bernie did 2 fucking terms, at the end of 8 years of Bernie, there would most likely still be some billionaires. Most likely. Even if he was able to get his wealth tax in, even if he was able to get all, of his wet dream financial policies in that he's talked about on the campaign trail, most likely there would still be some billionaires. It's just that the owner class and the billionaires that we do have can't stand to even have a little bit of that change happen, can't stand to have even a little bit of class consciousness inserted into the minds of voters, because once everybody realizes how uneven everything is and how far the deck is stacked against them, then people are going to get pissed, and they're going to stop getting mad at Mexicans, and they're going to start getting mad at rich people. And so they don't want that little bit of awareness of your financial situation to seep in, because once you have that flood break, like, how do you keep the fucking water from flowing in every direction? You can't. So, I mean, I get why, you have Michael Bloomberg in the race. I get why you have all these billionaires going out against Bernie and, saying this and that about him. I get why the media ignores him entirely. And, when he's climbing up, in second place, it's like people are like, oh, look, have you seen Pete Buttigieg? He's in a strong 4th right now. He is fucking killing it. I get that, because, even to the corporate media that Bernie is ignored by, he's a threat to their finances as well, because they take money from the same industries that he calls out on a regular basis. So, Bernie would be the end of the gravy train, if his sweeping, I guess, alterations to the system were to go through, it would be the end of the gravy train for a lot of people. It would be the end of the gravy train for the corporate Democrats, for the corporate media, for a lot of different things. Still, again, we'd be living in a market system. There would still be millionaires. There would still be rich people. But people would not be, sort of hand over fist, just pulling as much money out of the system as they want to in the fashion that they are now. So, having said all of that, again, I'm interested in voting for Bernie. I think one of the surest ways to guarantee that lefty-er politics stay in the mainstream circle and have a more of a fighting chance as we get closer to the end of this whole thing. Bernie and Warren getting together, I think, could be a killer ticket and could consolidate a good chunk of the left and unite a lot of people in the way that the Democratic Party acts like it's a uniter, but it's actually not. It would certainly be better than just fucking letting Biden stroll into the presidency, and it would certainly put the fucking brakes on everything that Mayo Pete has going. So,
what are the odds you give of Bernie winning?
I mean, I think there are really great odds of him playing out in the race all the way to the end. I think the odds of Bernie winning right now are basically the odds of Joe Biden looking like a total fucking fool in the eyes of the American electorate, to the point where he just seems unelectable. But still, even if that happens, given how many centrist, defectors there would be post Biden, a lot of that support could go to Pete. A lot of that support could go to Warren. Biden could split in a lot of different ways. Sure, there would be a lot of supporters that go to Bernie, but it's not guaranteed. And the thing is, the whole Mayor Pete campaign is a testament to the effectiveness of the corporate media, because if it wasn't for MSNBC making such a big fucking deal over his speeches and his identity and this, that, and the other thing, and he knows so many languages, he would not even be a factor in this race. They even managed a way to spin that whole fucking root piece about him in the media. But this is like a real W for Pete right now. He looks really great coming out of this think piece, calling him out effectively for being a totally fucking clueless numbnut when it comes to the poverty and the educational struggles of black families of color in this country. which I think that he still is. I mean, I think we're not really coming to terms with how recent those comments were. Sure, if we look at the videotape, it looks like it was shot in 1985, but those comments came out in 2011. What a lot of people haven't pointed out about the ridiculousness of Pete's comments in that video, which have you seen that video?
Are you referencing the one where he's talking about like role models?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I seen that one.
The most ridiculous fucking thing about those comments that people haven't really been, pointing out, and I get why, because the media is not going to call them out for it, and black communities aren't going to point it out because black communities do have role models, do have people in their lives and in their families telling them what the value of an education is. But one thing that's not really being pointed out is that if this is really the case, if this is the world according to Pete, and all of this is true, and everything that Pete says is right, why was the election of Barack Obama not this fucking come to Jesus moment where everybody of color is like, oh, wow, an education can actually get you into the presidency. I might as well get educated now. Of course, that's not what happened, because prior to Barack Obama and post Barack Obama, people of color understand that education opens doors. People of color understand that education can get you opportunities. But what Pete is just sort of ignoring is just like the elephant in the room. If it's a role model problem, why isn't Barack Obama the ultimate role model? Why isn't that the example of the role model that we have that are pulling these people in impoverished communities into schools and into 4.0 GPAs and into high-paying jobs and this, that, and the other thing? Like, clearly that's still a bit of a barrier. So why wasn't Barack Obama essentially that catalyst for that sea change of a necessity for role models that, according to you, are lacking? I don't know how you could be so tone deaf and so stupid as to say that the black community lacks role models when we literally have an incredibly smart, effective, and effective in the political and rhetorical sense, president, in the opinion of many people, one of the best presidents in years and years and years, and off. He's black. I mean, ultimate example of a black role model for the black community, if that's really what the black community needs. But of course, like, Mayor Pete couldn't put two and two together on that because he's, again, like, completely outside of the interests and the everyday struggles and lives of these communities in this conversation that he claims to have so much of a sense of, like, what they're missing and what they need.
So, yes, that is true. And what I'm curious is, do you think Pete is a threat to Bernie?
I don't think Pete is a threat to Bernie because ideologically they're so on the opposite sides of the spectrum. And I think that Mayor Pete has repeatedly not so much directly gone after Bernie Sanders, though I'm sure there's some examples of that, but basically tried to be the antithesis to all the narratives that Bernie has been putting out there on the campaign trail in terms of Medicare for all and this social program and that social program. Pete is the one who's been trying to create the anti-narrative to that. And I think most Bernie supporters like sort of smell that bullshit. If anything, I think Pete's been eating into everybody around him. He's eating into some of the centrists with Warren. He's eating into some of the Biden support. He is eating into some of the percentages below him, because I understand that Pete's, polling at like 11% or a little bit more right now. And now underneath him, nobody's polling under 2. Whereas that was not the case months ago, where you did have some 4s and 5s and 3s. And maybe in some polls you still do. But generally, from what I'm seeing in most mainstream media outlets, nobody's polling above 2 right now. So you have basically Pete at 11 and everybody else, with double digits above that. I think Biden is still in the 20s. So I don't think Pete is really that big of a threat to Bernie ideologically, because I think Bernie supporters pay a little bit more attention to politics than Pete supporters do, and and understand that the social programs that Bernie's bringing to the table are not only necessary, but so utterly possible because every other fucking first world country does them, and with a way smaller fucking budget than we have.
Do you think that any other candidate could win a general election against Donald Trump that isn't Bernie Sanders?
Um, I think that Donald Trump uh, as bad as Donald Trump is, and he is bad, I think that he hasn't totally fucked up the lives of average people in the same way that George W. Bush did over the course of his presidency yet. I'm not saying that, he hasn't hurt people and he's not, affecting things negatively. He obviously has. But he really needs to do a bit more than what he's doing currently, in terms of negatively impacting farmers and various businesses and obviously, immigrant families. He's not negatively impacting enough people in a real and palpable way, or rather a tangible way, to sort of convince even most Republicans that he's, terrible for the country. In the same way that a majority of Republicans agreed that George Bush was absolute fucking trash by the time that he was on the way out. In the way that he just sort of essentially destroyed the economy, in the way that he just dragged the country into one unnecessary invasion after another, in the way that he sort of eroded our civil liberties. I mean, you have Trump fans out here who are still convinced that I'm doing so much better because of the tax cut. There's a little bit more money in my paycheck, and I've completely put my head in the sand in terms of not understanding that this is eventually going to turn into a tax hike for me 10 years down the road. You have people who are still living in the bliss of the Trump tax cut being amazing for them, even though maybe it's bringing them in in total a couple more $1,000s that they wouldn't have had otherwise at the end of the year, which, I mean, that's a testament to how much people are struggling in this country right now, that a couple more $1,000s at the end of the year in your paycheck in total is this fucking sea change, or rather, this epiphany. And you're like, oh my God, I can't believe how amazing this president is. Consider how little that is in terms of what we could be spending our money on and what we could be doing financially for those same exact people. But I think Trump is still a threat, honestly, because the right-wing propaganda machine is totally 110% behind him, unquestionably. As much as he does love to make hay over never Trumpers, on social media, people who were previously very bold and vocal never Trumpers, like Ben Shapiro, for example, prior to Trump's election, are currently just completely falling in line and have no room to question Trump or attack Trump. I mean, it would be a total sinking of Ben Shapiro's ship for him to come out, as anti-Trump as he did back in 2016, when he was still running as candidate Trump. So there's very room in the Republican Party. There's very little room in the Republican Party outside of what maybe some alt-righters would refer to as cuck Republicans or whatever. Very little room for these people to actually build any kind of coalition against him, or any kind of tide against him or his policies, or the negative impacts he's having on the country. So with the Republican Party and the propaganda machine and the billionaire class, even people like Bill Gates, has not come out and explicitly said, "Oh, I'm gonna pick who's the most professional." And look, we know at the end of the day, if it were Bernie Sanders versus Trump, if it was even Elizabeth Warren versus Trump, we know who Bill Gates is going to vote for. So with even the billionaire class totally down for Trump, because capital is going to swing the way of fascism if in the other direction, there is even a little bit of a threat of some redistributive policies. Now, I'm not even going to say socialism, because pure unadulterated socialism isn't even what Bernie and Warren are offering. Warren is trying to do a 2% wealth tax, which is about as light of a fucking touch as you can apply. So again, capital is going to cut further and further to the right if even a slightly redistributive policy is in the other direction. So look, those are a lot of hurdles to overcome. And so while I agree that Trump is stupid and he's a moron and he says so much dumb shit, and the guy can't even get his own party to form behind him to, push out a policy that he's been talking about on the campaign trail, which ultimately is a positive. The fact that he's such a bumbling fucking buffoon that he can't get anything done. The fact that all of these things are true. It has not changed the fact that there are a lot of people who are in support of him, or in support of him staying in office, in support of anything bad happening to him, just because for the media, for the billionaire class, Trump is the closest thing to the status quo. If it means Trump versus Mayor Pete, you may see a cut in the other direction where people will say, okay, let's try to regain some sanity here and support Mayor Pete, because we know that he's only going to give us the visual of change, and people, for the most part, will feel it, and they'll take that hit of soma and they'll be like, oh, things are better. Oh, thank God that guy's out of office, and now we can have Mayor Pete in here really shaking things up. People will take that hit of soma and will be happy that Trump is gone, and we'll feel like we've made some progress because Mayor Pete's in there. There is the potential for that. But if it comes down to Trump versus Warren or Trump versus Bernie, you're not going to see those billionaire defectors. You're not going to see those quote unquote good billionaires who, billionaires with hearts. You're not going to see that. They're all going to quietly vote for and put their money toward the Republicans winning, because at the end of the day, the Republicans are going to defend their business interests. The Republicans are going to allow them to keep the most, largest percentage of their money they could possibly keep. So again, as a result of that, their interests are going to cut in that direction. And for the Democrats, no matter who's running, those are huge hurdles to overcome. Those are gigantic hurdles to overcome.
So, speaking on the topic of elections, there was a pretty big bomb that was dropped a couple of weeks ago. Cenk Uygur announced that he's running for California 25, the 25th district of California. Now, and that was after Katie Hill resigned after a scandal and everything. So I wanted to get your thoughts on, whether or not you support his run and what kind of effect you think it could have if he is to win. What are his odds of winning? And just sort of give me your thoughts on that all around, especially because he's had such a, sort of the dark past in a lot of ways. I just want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, honestly, I gave money to the campaign. I gave money to Cenk's campaign. And it's not even that I think I'm like the biggest fucking Cenk fan, or I think he's amazing, or I think he's like this political genius or anything like that. But to me, just like we were having with the ContraPoints conversation earlier, it's a strategic decision. It's a utilitarian decision. Having Cenk in office, and even just campaigning, frankly, as much as I disagree with him on issue X, Y, or fucking Z, is a net gain. It's a net fucking gain. And I feel like that there are more people on the left that need to have a come to Jesus moment and understand that, like, look, the leftist political space is not like, your friend area. It's not the socialization zone. It's not a place. It's not, your safe space. It's not where everybody has to fucking agree with you on everything. We need to think about our moves, and we need to think about who we're supporting and who we're not supporting from a more utilitarian position. Like, it doesn't need to be a perfect change. It just needs to be some, alteration in the direction that we're trying to move in on the whole. And look, the reason that I advocate for this type of thinking is this is the exact type of thinking the Republicans have applied for several generations. And look at all the ground that it's gained them over the past 30 or 40 years in terms of gerrymandered districts, in terms of Citizens United, in terms of the courts that Trump has been able to pack over the course of his presidency, which is one of the few things he's actually been effective at, just sort of getting in federal judges, right-wing federal judges under the, help of, sort of tutelage. Tutelage is probably not the word I'm looking for, but with the help of Mitch McConnell. Look at that race that's running in Mitch's district with that very blue dog Democrat woman who has some pretty right-wing, points of view. Even if we were able to get her into office, it would be a net gain. For as much as I disagree with her on many different things, to have the top Republican out Mitch McConnell, who has effectively been, the gravedigger of democracy, who has undone all sorts of, rules and stipulations and previously what were just honor system understandings of how our democracy worked. He's fucking torn all that apart and ripped it all fucking apart. He does not give a fuck about process. At the very least, as much as I may disagree with this person who's running against him, and I think she's running a kind of ineffective campaign, making it seem like, oh, I care more about what Trump wants to do than Mitch McConnell does. To have her in office as an ineffective senator, as basically a benign non-threat, who is basically probably not going to get much of anything done, as a sometimes Democrat, sometimes Republican. It would be more effective to take out that later leadership and basically, have somebody way less, or rather way more clueless than Mitch take up the position that Mitch is supposed to be in. So I think at the end of the day, we need to think about our, choices here, and we need to think about who we support, and we need to think about the overall everything moving to the left. It does not need to be perfect. Now, I know that sounds like a bullshit, incrementalism argument, but it's not. I'm not saying that you need to sacrifice, the good for the perfect. What I'm saying is that in the context that you're currently in, make the best choice and advocate for the best decision. You're not always going to have the ideal decision put in front of you. In fact, I would say that 99% of the time, you're never going to have the ideal decision put in front of you. Just take the best decision put in front of you and just have that be that, and I think that Cenk is an example of what is the best decision offered to, the people in his district, to, whoever online can manage to just shell a few dollars to his campaign or whatever. Cenk for the left, as far as mainstream politics, again, would be a net benefit, would be a net good. He'll at least get in there and advocate for something like Medicare for all, which is like, again, just a baseline fucking thing that we should have. Sure, I disagree with him on some issues of capitalism and a bunch of other stuff, but Jesus, there's some very baseline functional policies and, bits of legislation that we should have that we just don't, because we've allowed money in politics to grease the wheels for too long and prevent actual change or progress on any of these fronts from happening. Cenk would at least get us a little bit closer to creating the kind of change that we want to see in terms of, again, Medicare for all, money in politics, and a host of other issues that, he fights on that I agree with him on.
Okay, so that's a pretty good summary. The last question I have for you, do you know about Jordan Peterson's new platform, Thinkspot? Did you hear about it at all? Did you see it?
No, is that like a fucking G spot, but for radical centrists?
So
like,
it's
is that
his
like
Patreon alternative is what it is.
Oh, okay.
You
All
didn't
right.
see that at all? You didn't see it on anywhere on Twitter or social
No,
media?
I've not. No, I mean, while I do follow politics on Twitter, I don't follow anybody who I hate or I think is stupid. So, if I do see any of that sort of thing, it's usually because, someone like Ken Klippenstein is like retweeted it or something. So, and I don't think, guys like him really follow the, what is it? The fucking, the ideological dark web. I forget what the fuck they call themselves.
Intellectual dark web, the
Yeah,
IDW. Yes.
yeah. I don't know how far into that rabbit hole guys like him go. Yeah, I don't see too much of the intellectual dark web unless somebody who is just some kind of lefty memer or something retweets them. So I've not seen the G spot for radical centrists. No.
Are you considering joining it? It's a Patreon alternative. It's started by Jordan Peterson. Yeah.
How much of the money goes to Jordan Peterson? That's my question.
I'm actually not sure. I don't know.
I want to know the cut. I got to know the cut that goes.
You got to discuss it with them. I'm not sure.
I'll go on the platform if he gives me a good ratio. If I get a good ratio.
Okay. All right. So, is there any last thing that you want to say?
That's it. I mean, thanks for having me on and letting me rant about politics. Though I mean, being on your channel doesn't stop me from doing that. I guess I'm just flattered that you even give a shit about my opinion for whatever reason. I mean, probably because I got 2 million subscribers, but I'd like to think that you think I'm a pretty cool guy too. Got a little
Oh,
man crush on
absolutely.
me.
I don't know.
It's
Well,
not.
actually, that went a little far, but yes, you're a
No,
cool guy, of course.
it's not. You know, it's not gay for you to find me aesthetic. You know, that's not gay for two homies to find each other a little aesthetic. That's not a bad thing.
It's no homo, huh?
I'm pro homo.
Okay.
I'm pro homo. I'm just saying, you know, if you are the type of person who's insecure in their, sexuality, you don't got to worry. We're not breaking the seal or anything.
I
You
see.
know, just by
Okay.
admiring each other.
Okay. I understand that. Okay. All right. Okay. So thank you for joining. I really appreciate it, and I'll be sure to have you